Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar from Omdia, brought to you by Informatech. My name is Alan Tatara, Senior Event Manager for the Omdia webinar team, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Today's webinar discusses the sudden rise of Open RAN. Our panel will explore what Open RAN is, how it works, and why it's rising in popularity. Our webinar is co-presented by Omdia, and our partners Fujitsu Network Communications, Nokia, and VIAVI Solutions. So now let me introduce our panel. First leading our discussion is Daryl Schooler. Daryl is a practice leader in the Service Provider Technology segment at Omdia. We are also joined by Dr. Olufemi Adeyemi. Femi is Chief Wireless Solutions Architect at Fujitsu Network Communications. We also have Sandro Tavares. Sandro is the Head of Mobile Networks Marketing at Nokia. And rounding out our panel, we have Ben Labasani. Ben is 5G Business Development Director at VIAVI Solutions. So welcome to our panel. We are honored to have you with us today. I will now turn things over to Daryl so we can get started. Daryl?
Thank you, Alan. And hello and welcome to everybody listening to this online or even in replay. I think you're going to find today's webinar to be very educational and instructive. Certainly, Open RAN within this area as we move into 5G has become one of the hottest topics of this year. As I observed early in the year, if we actually had Mobile World Congress, I think it probably would have been one of the biggest news stories or themes coming out of the event. So on this slide right here, you can see today's agenda. We're going to start off with me just speaking just kind of briefly about market trends to make sure we're all on the same playing field as we move forward. And then we'll move on through the rest of the topics here in terms of problems, challenges, options, solutions, the speakers, their own vendors, different solutions, what they're offering here. So first, so I've been, a research analyst for, I think, over 20 years now. And I remember going way back during the days of 3G, working with a more senior analyst at the time. And I asked him several times, what does this mean? What do they mean by this term or something? And he always would give me the answer, well, it really just kind of depends on who's talking. And he said that is kind of the rule of thumb that's always been in wireless in terms of a lot of times, the meaning of something of a term depends on who is the speaker or the audience. Open RAN is certainly a great example of this. And I just spend a minute here just talking about this because I think as we move forward, it's very important to make sure that we are all speaking the same language. But when you get into this Open RAN area, there's a lot of different other terms being thrown around and talked about that don't always exactly mean the same thing. For example, take Cloud RAN. Nokia today, they announced their Cloud RAN solution, but it's really it is a fully virtualized solution as well. But sometimes when I'm having discussions, some people talk about Cloud RAN and it has to be very specific in terms of all of the baseband unit components being centralized up in the cloud, while in the Nokia announcement, it's fully virtualized, but there is still a distributed element to it at this time. Same time, people kind of mix up vRAN and Open RAN, which isn't, always the case. They can't be used synonymously. vRAN, there's two different ways. You can talk about what they call vRAN 1.0, which is just virtualizing the CU, or 2.0, when both the DU and the VU are virtualized. But vRAN doesn't actually have to be open. It can still be a purpose-built type solution from a single vendor. While Open RAN, on the other hand, is actually, you can have, mixed vendors, but the parts don't always have to be virtualized. And at the same time, O-RAN itself, in my mind, is very much more specific, talking about the different open interfaces. But those open interfaces doesn't have to mean, again, that you have a different radio vendor from your baseband vendor. While, the interface in there is going to be designed to allow that openness, you can build a network to O-RAN specifications without exactly mixing the two vendors there or even virtualizing it. So in any time, from an operator perspective, if you talk to vendors or you're at an event or something, I think it's very important to make sure that you understand how they are defining the terms that they're talking about to make sure that you're both actually having the same discussion. So speaking of O-RAN somewhat more generically, what are the drivers and what are some of the challenges? And this comes from different research that I've done at Omdia, be it interviews directly with operators or, say, surveys from heavy reading, which is also part of Informatech. In terms of what some of the drivers are, we've seen people talk about they want more RAN vendors to choose from in the bidding process. They feel the market's become very solidified around just a couple vendors, and they want some more variety in there. Also, to talk about supply chain security without us going too deeply into everything that's driving that is definitely an issue that operators are becoming concerned about, that if one of their suppliers are unable to fulfill a contract or for some reason they have to rip and replace that vendor, they can more easily do it, and they see open interfaces making the plug and play of the different parts within the RAN easier to achieve. And then there's also, moving into like a cloud type culture or environment operators want to move in. They want more of that IT type experience. And then there's also the idea of best of breed vendors. You can mix and match, or you can get different feature sets from different vendors. And there is also lower CapEx. So I will say from the research that we've done, while CapEx is brought up a lot and certainly is important, it is not the driver in all cases for going with an open RAN. And it certainly applies to some areas such around rural networks, but it is not always the #1 driver. But then, of course, there's always challenges as well, and there's a whole other section coming up on this from our presenters themselves, so I don't spend too much time on it, but we've seen different operators talk about challenges saying as we move to open, it means more vendors, so there's greater system integration headaches, they believe, or some of the technologies that we're talking around here around open, whether it's the virtualization of the DU or the maturity of the different interfaces, still need some work in their feelings in terms of reaching that, getting to that performance level that they're looking for, or also making sure that the solution as a whole can match up to a single vendor purpose-built solution. So enough of me talking. It's time for me to turn it over to why you really came here, is to hear from our great speakers today. And the first section, we're going to go a little bit more in depth and hear from their different point of views, whether it is a network supplier, system integrator, test and measurement, just talking about some of the problems and challenges operators will face and have to deal with as they move into Open RAN. So let me pass this on to Sandro.
Thanks, Daryl. And well, hi everyone. Really happy to be here with you guys and discussing this topic that is so on top of our of the hype cycle and basically out of on top of our interests as well right now, right? So talking about like the problems and challenges, so I have put like a few dimensions here that I would like to touch, right? So when we look into Open RAN implementation, looking into, for example, implementing the open front haul interface, of course, there is a huge opportunity there in terms of creating a more diverse ecosystem, exactly as Daryl has said. You have also the ability of having system integrators popping in to optimize the performance of the network, like, for example, our colleagues from Fujitsu here. But of course, it comes with challenges, right? So first of all, multi-vendor conformance is still an issue, even though this is why we're developing 7.2x and the open front haul interface under O-RAN, but it's still something that requires some work, right? And then there is the whole discussion around performance, right? So how do you make sure that solutions from different vendors, they integrate well to the point that you can really achieve peak performance compared to what you would have in an integrated setup. On the vRAN architecture point of view, which is another dimension, right? So you have the opportunity of bringing new players, aligning between like web scale providers and operators, and basically having them even complementing each other's, which is a good thing. But of course, it brings challenges in terms of defining the architecture, for example, alignment on what kind of accelerators are going to be used, which is important to make the architecture and the network itself more efficient, but it brings challenges, right? Even on the RIC, which for me is one of the big net news, so it brings opportunities like, new value creation, the possibility of a new ecosystem of really performance-focused applications being created. But also, you can argue that it brings a little bit of additional complexity to the network, right? And then, especially if you're talking about a cloud environment, when you look into automation orchestration, of course, brings the benefits of rapid service launch, automation, and so on. But at the same time, if you look into a disaggregated radio access network, and if you look into the orchestration solutions that we have on the market right now, there's still a gap, especially in handling a centralized orchestration solution handling such a distributed network and such a distributed cloud. So this is my kind of summary of problems and challenges, and now I'm going to pass the ball to Olufemi so he can bring the Fujitsu point of view.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, or wherever you are in the world. Talking about some of the complexities or challenges that Open RAN can possibly present, I want to address this from an O-RAN point of view, where it is O-RAN as one of the premier organizations that is looking at open interfaces from a total solution point of view. When we look at the complexity, we're talking about multiple interfaces. If you're looking at the diagram on the right of your slide, we're talking about front haul, F1, E1, and so many other interfaces that organization has actually, over the last 2 years, helped to define to allow for greater interoperability between multiple vendors, multiple components. You have multiple message exchanges that are going back and forth between those interfaces and the components. And then you're also talking about multiple configurations from an automation point of view. But then you also now throw in the aspect of the possibility of having multiple providers. That means, like we were saying in the beginning, the opportunity to have a variety of ecosystems, multiple radios, multiple BBU providers. So the challenges are actually complex, but the way we think about it is that this is a constraint optimization problem. So it is something that is possible to handle from a system integration point of view once the problems are properly dimensioned. In addition to that, Open RAN wireless network will have all these multiple interfaces like I've been describing. But if you think about it from a component point of view, if you only have one component to integrate, then you only have one interface or one track to follow. The moment you have more than one, quickly this will become something that is exponential, right? So look at when you have 10 components. When you have 5 components, then the number of interfaces, the number of components that you need to worry about increases. But these are challenges. They create opportunities, right? Integration becomes more complex, but it gives us the opportunity to dimension things properly and also make sure that at the end of putting all of this together, the performance is still met, the KPIs are still properly met, so that we're not sacrificing performance for the new opportunities that we see with openness. I'll now pass this over to Ben to talk a little bit more about how this will be tested. Over to you.
Thank you, Femi. Hi, everybody. So I'm just going to overlay a little bit on the test perspective now. So we're approaching an inflection point where infrastructure virtualization combined with embedded intelligence will deliver more agile services and innovative capabilities to networks. The transformation of RAN towards being open, intelligent, virtualized and interoperable is a well laid out vision, but the path to a scalable Open RAN deployment will not be without its challenges. In a multi-vendor environment, how would you ensure that the end-to-end system will interoperate and meet the key performance indicators that have been set out? Operators often need to test 3GPP network functions before commercial UEs are readily available that support those functions and features. So, how would you ensure that your RAN works with that limitation on the number of commercial UEs? Who takes the full responsibility for integration and maintenance of the RAN? How can you optimize for performance with scale and capacity? Can each disaggregated component cope with high data rates and aggregation of traffic in an end-to-end scenario? In a single vendor RAN, it is relatively simple to address performance issues, but in multi-vendor environments, you need to be able to test the interface to pinpoint the exact part that might be causing issues. These are all areas that need addressing throughout the life cycle of any Open RAN deployment. So back over to you, Daryl.
Thanks, Ben. Good stuff, everybody. Now we're going to move on talking about some of the different options and solutions that are available out there for operators as they look to move to an Open RAN type environment. Sandro? Oh.
Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, in this session, I chose to focus on one specific element that, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, for me is really the gateway for innovation and really the net new, right, in the O-RAN environment, the Open RAN environment, which is the RAN Intelligent Controller, the RIC. So basically what it is a new network element, right? Basically a software, a network function, right? That exposes APIs and exposes services that allow new players and even the existing players to start building innovative apps to leverage the ability of being closely integrated with the RAN. Right, so it kind of almost works as a platform as a service environment, right? So some use cases for it, like, for example, on the network intelligence point of view, policy enforcement, handover optimization, which actually tested with AT&T not long ago, and we just issued a press release about it last week. Then on resource assurance, so radio link management, advanced self-organizing networks. On the resource control side, so load balancing, policy management of slicing capabilities. So basically a whole myriad of possibilities that we are going to have with the RIC that involve, utilizing AI and ML algorithms to optimize all of these use cases. Right, so it is really a powerful network function that really opens up the capabilities of Open RAN being not only a driver of, mixing and matching solutions from different vendors, but really opening the space for new innovation on the radio access network. With that, passing the ball to you, Olufemi.
So looking at this from a technology and a complete solution point of view, we see opportunities for various kinds of options available as you approach this from a system integration point of view. I will highlight about three that we've come across and we continue to develop around them. The first one is what we define as technology-driven. That means the operator chooses to acquire the various technologies from every side of the network and procure services behind each of those technologies, right? So if you're looking at the diagram that I'm showing on the right, the technologies are acquired, the procure services around it, and the solution is developed and the network begins to be managed. That is traditional. We've seen that even in closed RAN, but you can still have that as part of an open RAN network or O-RAN network. Then the various nuances that we're also seeing is around solution driven, where you acquire technologies, you acquire the technologies, and then you ask a system integrator to put all of this together for you based on your choices, and then to still ensure that performance is met, KPIs are also met. This is very new because now you're talking about various components from different pieces. A particular system integrator needs to now put this together for you and ensure that your network is still functioning as you expect. And then another dimension that we're also seeing is what we are calling an outcome-driven approach, where the technologies are acquired, but the vendor wants to play side by side with the system integrator because they want to learn how to manage this network in the future. It's not something that somebody's going to manage for them. They want the opportunity to acquire the technology, work side by side with system integrator, and derive that outcome. So with the Open RAN ecosystem, we're seeing opportunities, options, solutions that are available to drive the economy going forward. Let me pass this over to Ben.
Thanks again, Femi. So prior to rolling out any network, extensive lab testing has always been a core requirement, and for Open RAN, this continues to be imperative. Such testing gives the operator, integrator, or the vendor the opportunity to identify, isolate, and resolve any network performance issues early. Shown here, there are many approaches to test in the lab, but to highlight a few. Multi-vendor interoperability test ensures that the mix of components will first of all work functionally, but on top, under capacity conditions, testing for performance, reliability, robustness, and furthermore, long-term resilience. For vendors with parallel development within O-RAN, it's possible to test their components in isolation by wrapping around the ancillary components. This could be highly valuable for specialist vendors that are targeting a niche market with their offering, but don't have end-to-end capabilities in-house. For example, a vendor may only be building a radio unit. VIAVI are committed to enabling the Open RAN ecosystem, and we actively participate in the Telecom Infra Project and O-RAN Alliance, in particular through leadership in the development of the interoperability test specification. We are also delivering our deep knowledge and expertise to the community through participating in PlugFests and Open Test and Integration Centers. So in a multi-vendor scenario, it is essential to ensure disaggregated RAN components are not impacting network performance. This can be achieved by validating them in the lab environment to make sure the nodes are functioning as per specification and are interacting with each other without causing performance issues. In order to meet KPI targets, scale testing under heavy traffic with varied devices and application mixes needs to be performed. This enables the discovery and subsequently the opportunity to address hypothetical failures likely to occur under real-world network conditions. There are many options for deploying multi-vendor networks, and the choices made for test will vary depending on that decision. One potential scenario is that the operator sources O-RAN distributed and centralized unit from one vendor and uses them with radio units sourced from multiple vendors. In this scenario, the operator could isolate the testing of the single vendor equipment, enabling the ODU and OCU to be tested and optimized, initially reducing the number of variables introduced by the ORUs. Once that is complete, end-to-end testing involving the complete ORU, DU, and CU chain should be performed as well. In another scenario, the ODU and OCU could be from different vendors, in the same way testing upwards from the F1 interface into the OCU supplied from the first vendor can be separated from the variability that may be introduced by the ORU and DUs from other vendors. So back over to you again, Daryl.
Thank you, Ben. And let's remind everybody in the audience to please continue to send in questions. And with an eye towards the clock, let me just pass this back to Sandra to talk about some deployment applications.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. And on the area of deployment applications, I would like to stress a little bit the aspects and basically let's say the relation between Open RAN and Cloud RAN, right? I see, as Daryl pointed out in the beginning of this webinar, there is a lot of confusion among those terms, and I believe it is important for us to really set things straight in terms of how are they working together, but also how they are different. I think that the best approach is to look into O-RAN as a term of horizontal openness, right? Where you are basically combining building blocks that are coming from different vendors and getting them to work together. So like, for example, you have the front haul interface with the CPRI, you have the mid haul, which is like the F1 interface between the CU and the DU. And then you have like the interfaces towards management orchestration and other parts, right? So they're all open interfaces that allow customers to mix and match solutions coming from different players. While vRAN actually can be seen as a more of a vertical openness, right? Where you're putting together like hardware, virtualization layer, and applications that could be from the same vendor or not, but really targets the separation of baseband hardware and software. And looking into that, I mean, there is two examples that show how actually these things are related, but also not the same thing, right? So for example, on top here, we have an example of O-RAN, an O-RAN implementation, but that is done with classical RAN. So it's an O-RAN that is not Cloud RAN, so where you have a purposely built baseband system with a front haul interface based on O-RAN, so totally open, and also the traditional open interfaces towards the core networks. On the second example here, we have actually O-RAN working simultaneously with vRAN 2.0, where you have like the open front haul from the virtual DU going towards the antenna system, the F1 interface between the virtual DU and the virtual CU, and the traditional open interface between the CU and the core network. So as stated on the title of the slide, these topics, these concepts, they are relatable, they work together, but they are not synonyms. You can have an open network that is not Cloud RAN, there is not vRAN, and you also can even have a vRAN network that is actually all built by the same vendor, like we do have in a few cases of our customers, and that is not really O-RAN compliant. So not all vRAN is O-RAN, and not all O-RAN is vRAN. Olufemi, moving over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. From a system integration point of view again, the nuances of O-RAN, Open RAN, vRAN, and Cloud RAN actually provide an exciting opportunity. So when we look at the deployment from a deployment application point of view, what traditionally we've seen in the past is just a customer managed environment, right? It's a one-on-one relationship between the vendor and the customer that they're serving, and customer manages their own network as this is built for them. So, but in the new paradigm, you will still have opportunities where technologies are being selected, they're being put together, whether by a single entity from the same provider, and the customer can still manage that network on their own. But here comes some very exciting opportunities where we're seeing what we're terming as build, operate, and manage. That means, so with the extension of RAN now into the open RAN space, you can now have the ability to build that network and some part of that network is being managed from a cloud point of view. So the technology is selected, it is built, and it's being managed by either a third party, a system integrator from a private cloud point of view, and it could also, again, be from a public cloud point of view. We're seeing many new entrants now that are looking at how can I run some part of my RAN from a cloud, a public cloud point of view. So they don't have to spend an entire amount of money building a private cloud. They can just leverage existing cloud infrastructure. And then a third distinct model that we're also seeing is what I call hybrid, where the technology is selected, the cloud environment is built, but with the view that a process is being defined by the system integrator, whereby at the end of this operation, there's a build, operate, and then it's transferred to the network operator, so that over time they get to learn this new paradigm we're in and be able to support their network going forward. I'm passing it over now to Ben.
Thanks, Femi. In an O-RAN environment, a new distributed unit, new front haul interface, and a new radio unit with many different configurations adds complexity and therefore risk for guaranteeing seamless interoperability. As you saw from Femi a moment ago, there's different models that they're considering in configuring such deployments. ODU focus testing is necessary to minimize this risk. In order for the network to support the 3GPP features and interactions, all network components must perform well. ODU vendors therefore need to ensure that their equipment can handle multi-vendor O-RAN radio units without introducing performance compromise and avoid the addition of new risks when looking at 3GPP feature interaction, for example. Extensive experience and VIAVI leadership in validation of 3GPP features and interactions over RF is leveraged in our ORU emulator solution. This can be used to validate the capability of an ODU to handle multi-vendor ORUs without any unexpected performance compromises. There are many interfaces and configurations to consider. For example, the O-RAN centralized unit is a major data aggregation point in the O-RAN architecture. The 3GPP F1 interface is responsible for connecting multiple ODUs back to the OCU for both the control plane and the user plane. Ensuring the performance of that important F1 interface is vital. Also ensuring that the OCU can handle the huge amount of data from many ODUs while supporting different traffic profiles from thousands of aggregated UEs. This is all important to qualify and quantify the overall network performance. By efficiently emulating hundreds of ODUs, aggregating UEs with real application traffic, it's possible to validate the performance of the OCU F1 interface and how individual UEs are successfully managed in a multi-vendor environment. Supplying a comprehensive test environment without the cost or complexity associated with many real ODUs and even more ORUs on top. UE stack integration allows realistic modeling of very high load traffic scenarios with dynamic F1 traffic emulation. All of the above will enable the successful delivery of a high-performance Open RAN network. So back over to you, Daryl.
Thank you. Now we're going to spend a few minutes hearing from our sponsors about how they're approaching this topic and what they can offer to operators. Sandro?
All right. Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, so I think that the most important point on our position is that we really believe on a fact-based approach to Open RAN, right? So up to now, of course, there's a lot of hype, which is good for awareness, and that is fine. But I think we are past the hype phase, right? And we really need to look into a pragmatic way of implementing Open RAN. And that's what we are doing at Nokia, right? First, by our participation in open forums. So we are one of the founding members of the O-RAN Alliance, and we are actually leading two of the most important work groups there, the Open Front Hall and the RIC work group. And we are also the first major vendor to join the Open RAN Policy Coalition, right? So we really believe that there is a role for us in this environment, not only on driving the research, but also to really help make things real, right? So to generate traction behind Open RAN. On the Cloud RAN side, which is a technology that is going to be extremely important for the implementation of Open RAN networks, we have been pretty active in Cloud RAN for a long time right now, right? So we are actually the only vendor that really has a full 5G cloud portfolio for service providers, even running, for what I understand, the only 5G commercial network in the world that is based in vRAN 1.0 standards and moving to vRAN 2.0 in the future, right? So we see Cloud RAN as a very, very important step towards openness. And then at the end of the day, this movement towards Open RAN is really also about helping the creation of an open and secure telecom supply chain, right? So really making sure, as pointed out already in this webinar, that the world really can rely on a telecom supply chain that is efficient and that is able to provide options to our customers, right, and to governments as well. So at the end of the day, our approach is really about making it real, right, and helping Open RAN evolve from a proposition, from hype, into really a reality for our market. With that, over to you, Olufemi.
So thanks, Sandro. From Fujitsu's point of view, although I've spent a lot of time today talking about looking at open from a system integration point of view, Fujitsu is very, very active from a O-RAN Alliance point of view, Open RAN policy. We're one of the first companies actually in the world to have open O-RAN compliant components in major networks today. So when we talk about this, it's no longer just paperware. This is real. This is real for us. It's defining how we see our strategy going forward. So when you look at it in total, we have various components from the transport side, software side, RAN side, whether that's radio, BBU, or partner with virtual CUDU providers, and look at all of that from an open ecosystem point of view, whether that's O-RAN 3GPP, Linux Foundation. But because we understand the RAN in its full chain, we can then bring all of that together under an integration and certification point of view, so that the end solution that you have is something that meets the performance that you're looking for. You're not going to sacrifice performance for open, right? So it's a proven solution that is scalable, although it's a constraint optimization problem, but it's constrained and it can be solved. And we have been part of major networks in the world where this has been solved. Okay, from a system integration point of view, then it's the entire gamut where we consult with you, understand where you want to be from a system integration. Remember all the various options that I described. Are you interested in doing this on your own, having a single point of contact? Do you want to use cloud, or are you also interested in build, operate, and then transfer? We look at the total solution for you, so that we can present you with capable solution and capable people to enjoy the maximum of flexibility that network provides for you. And then this is very important. For us, 5G creates that inflection. It matches with our future strategy around digital transformation, which essentially says, how do we connect industry with the right solution? And in between, you have AI, you have your network flexibility with 5G. It's the entire ecosystem that we bring together. We want to co-create with our vendors or our providers so that we give them that digital transformation that we have been working on for so long. So Open RAN gives us that ability to speed up that innovation, whether that's IoT or AI, and then help to accelerate the various services that we can create for you as you evolve your network, whether that's a greenfield or you are adding more to the brownfield. So for Fujitsu, although we're talking from a system integration point of view, we have an array of solutions that are available to you, whether that's on radios, right, transport, CUDU, partner with others, automation, system integration. 5G gives us that ability to support you in that space. Let me turn this over to Ben.
Thanks again, Femi. So VIAVI is a leading network test company offering a comprehensive portfolio of solutions, simplifying the complexity of testing different O-RAN interfaces across the network, with product platform continuity as well. Today, we have touched on a subset of lab tests, but we offer solutions that are end-to-end and span the full life cycle. The portfolio includes fully virtualized, first-to-market NFV test tools that can run in the cloud or commercial off-the-shelf hardware for core test and emulation, field portable instruments for cell site installation and activation, and finally, assurance products that provide visibility to operators once their network is live and starting to scale. You can rely on an unparalleled global support footprint, reduced complexity of integration, and coordinated support. Over many years of working with all major vendors and small cell manufacturers, VIAVI has built a reputation as a trusted supplier of leading-edge cellular test equipment. Our flexible approach and ability to accommodate different customer requirements allows us to support the various options and configurations different operators may require in order to deploy their specific Open RAN solutions. We can do all of this from the lab through to field deployment and onto assurance of a commercial network. So that's a wrap from me. Looking forward to the Q&A and ongoing discussion. So back over to you, Daryl, for the intro to Q&A and conclusions.
Thank you, Ben. Some great stuff there. So just some quick conclusions before we move on. One, I think overall, Open RAN will be a positive for operators as a whole over time. That there's many different options and advantages coming forward depending on what their strategy is and what they're looking for. So of course, one of the things I think we started up front, and as you've seen through this, Open RAN itself is not a singular monolithic architecture. It's really kind of a change of culture in terms of moving more towards openness and looking at different options. And of course, I think for an operator, there's a lot of factors to consider. Are you greenfield? Are you brownfield? What's your service strategy? What are the different technologies you're looking at in terms of maturity? And of course, with everything else, as moving to new technology, these still need to mature, and what you see today isn't what you're going to see in 3 or 4 years. And one of the fastest ways, I think, for us to get there and to see maturity and see how this develops is really going to take some large-scale commitments from operators. If they're really interested in it, they need to go forward and make the investments to help drive the vendors in terms of trials to learn about this. So now, though, let's move on to our questions and answer sessions with our speakers. The first one I'd like to bring up, and this would be for you, Femi, and if anybody else wants to join in, go ahead. But in an Open RAN environment, obviously, future complexity of multiple vendors appear to favor the professional service arm or system integrator versus, say, the traditional operator's own operations staff. Will their functions shift in an Open RAN scenario of managing the SI versus the traditional operation functions that they are performing today? And so by their functions, I believe we are talking about the traditional operator's operations arm. Femi, would you like to take that one? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for that question. In one of the slides that Fujitsu presented, we showed three distinct different models that are available as we see the terrain going forward. You can still have your traditional customer managed environment. What is now new is what is being managed. Instead of looking at the solution from a single vendor, now you're looking at the various components that now make up what that solution looks like. So the function of those who are managing those networks from the operator point of view is actually going to be increased. It's not going to challenge the function that they currently do today. It will now help them to see how various components combine together to form what they were enjoying previously in a single provider network. But to me and to Fujitsu, we actually see many more opportunities coming online, whether that's from a system integration point of view, whether that's from a cloud management point of view, whether that is either public cloud or private cloud, hybrid being another flavor. So it doesn't limit what is possible in a network. It actually expands it even beyond what is available today. So opportunities are not strained in the network or in the network operation. It is increased. Back to you, Daryl.
Sandra, I think you also said you'd like to speak a little bit about this.
Yeah. I just wanted to add a little bit on top of Femi's answer, right? So what I believe is happening here, and is going to happen here, is pretty similar to what I experienced a couple of years ago on the transition of the core networks to the cloud, right? Where initially there was all this discussion about, integration and who manages it and so on. And what we have observed is that made the figure of the prime integrator appear in these projects, right? So regardless of all of the mix and match that happens on the network, the service provider defines a prime integrator to basically manage, we can even say like manage the chaos in the beginning, right? So to make sure that you have an entity, an integrator that is able to make sure that all of the players, all of the providers that are part of this network, they are working together, that the integrations are properly made, that when there is a problem, that a proper troubleshooting happens and not, pushing the blame from one company to the other. So that's kind of what I expect to see happening in this domain as well, that you're going to have service providers choosing a prime integrator for their O-RAN implementation processes, so they have a better control and someone that actually helps them through this transition. Back to you, Daryl.
Thanks. And the next question is actually for Ben. Continuous innovation, continuing development represents an ongoing challenge into deploying multi-vendor Open RAN solutions and keeping up with the multiple disjointed software releases. Does Open RAN require a full-time test bed in order to maintain network stability and operation? And how long do these tests take to complete?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So So I guess, in short, the answer is really that we have to provision test throughout the life cycle of any type of network, really. It's not a case of, test in the lab and deploy and forget. Throughout the life cycle, there will be upgrades required, and obviously with continuous integration and delivery, that's going to be more agile than ever before. So I think there's a really high importance to have, highly intuitive test tools that can really accelerate that phase. On top of that, there's also going to be future releases of 3GPP variants. There's going to be, change requests that might warrant regular test cycles, and you have to kind of go through that process over again every time. So, typically, in the lab phase, we're kind of validating that, first of all, the node in itself is functional to the specification, but then it is also able to cope under capacity, and then furthermore, how does it cope under long test cycles and regression, perhaps, stressed over a long period of time. And then when we get into the field phase, obviously we need to ensure that the actual nodes that are deployed at whatever point in the RAN are functional to specification over the air or the back, front, or mid-haul. And then, once the network is deployed at scale, I touched on this very briefly and talking a little bit about network assurance, but there's going to be a variety of agents that need to sit within the network that are monitoring the key performance indicators and really ensuring that things are working as expected. So it's not a case of building a test bed and ticking that box and deploying and going. It's an ongoing process that needs to follow with the evolution of new features.
Thank you, Ben.
Back to you, Daryl, or if anyone else has any comments.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. So this next question is definitely for you, Sandra. As it goes, from the question goes, I'd like to understand, why is Nokia on this call? Clearly, this is about cost reduction, and regardless what Nokia states in its marketing, their solutions are highly expensive and lock customers in. So the straight opposite of open. The person would like to know how honest Nokia really is about this when it comes to massive cost reduction.
That's an interesting question, right? First of all, let me say that I'm glad to see that this was not asked by any of our customers, right? So that is a good start, right? Let me just say that you're probably a little bit uninformed about the role of Nokia in open initiatives and so on. So I'll try to clarify a little bit. But first of all, the point about this whole thing being about cost reduction, I don't think that positioning Open RAN and O-RAN simply as a cost reduction exercise actually do justice to what we're trying to achieve. It goes much beyond that, right? It is really about, of course, you may eventually have cost reductions, but it is about having a more open radio environment that allows for more players to be part of it, which leads to a more secure telecom supply ecosystem. And also it leads to potential faster innovation if we just take the example of the RIC, right? About the direct questions about Nokia being open or not, I think that out of the major vendors, and this is not only by me saying, we have several reports around that, we are the ones that have been more forthcoming in terms of joining open initiatives and participating in open communities. And this goes much beyond and started much earlier than the Open RAN push. So if you look into all of the work we have done in OpenStack, in bringing clouds, native environments to the core, and so on, I believe that basically it speaks for itself. About stickiness, right? So if we just take one example, so which one is the only network out there in the world that is closer to what we could say it is an Open RAN network? That is Rakuten, and we are there. We were actually the first vendor or the only major vendor that agreed to be part of that setup, basically integrating with another vendor on the front haul interface, right? And honestly, I mean, if you think that this is only about a marketing ploy, I mean, last time I checked, my marketing department was not participating on the O-RAN work groups, right? So this is actually real engineering and real work being done to deploy, for example, the open front haul and the RIC, and that actually reflects on the announcements that we have been doing on the market. So in the last week, we have this announcement of a trial of the RIC with AT&T showing some of these functionalities that I talked about in my presentation. And then today we announced a big development on Cloud RAN. And so that really shows that we are working, we are developing this thing, and we are serious about it. So I think that there is one thing that has never been disputed about Nokia is about how we are honest in running our business, and that's not going to be different in the Open RAN story. So I just think that the person that asked these questions are a bit uninformed about what we're doing, and I'm more than happy to show more details about our work on openness. Back to you, Daryl.
Thank you. Thank you. So I know we're reaching the top of the hour. We have time for one more question. So any of our speakers who would like to take this on, please speak up. And the question is, as we move into more multi-vendor type solutions, are there standard KPIs that all the vendors support?
Okay. So this is Femi. I don't want us to leave this webinar assuming that because we are now talking about open network, open RAN network, O-RAN, that KPIs are going to be sacrificed. That is far from the truth. 3GPP continues to work on Release 16, migrating that to 17, and so on. You have a new core in 5G core. And so when we participate with operators on what they are looking for on their network, one of the first things that they're going to present us is, here are the KPIs that I want you to meet, whether that's call setup, throughput, none of that will change. And so what we're actually seeing is Open RAN infrastructure being built to still continue to meet or even exceed standard KPIs that are being published today from 3GP point of view. So openness does not translate to sacrifice KPIs. KPIs from a network point of view are still being met. They are being challenged in some cases, but that's what operators are looking for. They don't want to sacrifice their network. They want to see new innovations in the network that meets existing KPIs or even transcends the ones that are being published. So I want to leave on that high note that KPIs are not going to be sacrificed. The point of Open RAN that Daryl opened with are the benefits that have been described, where you can mix and match, you can evolve your network, but not at the expense of KPIs. All right, back to you, Daryl.
Thank you, Femi. Ben, Sandro, either one of you would like to take this on before we wrap up?
I could chime in briefly, I guess, just re-emphasizing that, a lot of these KPIs that are set out, you need visibility in the network to be able to ascertain that it's working to specifications. So, from our perspective, we're vendor neutral. We provide stuff that is based on the specifications that we support. And we can really give, at whatever level, be it the operator or systems integrator or vendor, the insight that they need in order to be sure that they're going to be able to deploy with what they set out to deploy for their customers.
Yeah, if I may add just a final comment on this. So this is actually why the work within the O-RAN Alliance is so important, right? Because then there we are defining the interfaces, we are defining, well, together with all the vendors on how these things will work so we can really maintain the level of KPI and the reliability of the network that our customers do expect, right? So this is a very important point. It's not supposed to be, and we have to be very careful not to fall into a world where we are doing ad hoc integrations on one-to-one, on custom mode from customer to customer, because then it could really impact the KPIs. So it is important that we are working in these open standards and the open interfaces to make sure that we can deliver and maintain the KPI levels we see today. With that, back to you, Daryl.
Thank you. And this brings us to the conclusion of this. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Femi, Sandro, and Ben. I know we ran over a few minutes, but certainly that's a sign of a good presentation and a lot of questions out there. Alan?
Thank you, Daryl, and thanks to all of our speakers as well. Special thanks to Daryl for leading our discussion today. So again, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.